Hey, folks, I'm Scotty Roberts. Welcome to the pre-show for the Intrepid radio program, where we've got 3 minutes and nothing, just making sure we're all set up and ready to roll. We go live on air over at the radio station at odysseyradio.com, and it's audio only, but we go on at 3 minutes after the top of the hour, and that's when we officially start this show. So it's just a little BSing and a little getting our feces coagulated prior to going live. So all of you joining me on Patreon, I sure appreciate it. Thank you for your support here. And we should be playing live right now over on Patreon. I'm just double checking it. There we go. We're here. We're live. We're doing it. We're kicking. So how's everybody's day? Working today? And body feels tired today. That's weird. I think it's just, being in my 60s and blah, blah, blah. So got to get into better shape. Just flexibility, not durability. What's the word I'm looking for? Endurance. All of those things, get muscles toned again. Rainey and I are working on that. So it's all a thing of just doing the best to drive away the encroaching old age. So if you're feeling old like me, well, here we are. So join the club. And that's all I got for that, because we're just getting set up. And I got a couple other things. We'll probably do one of these cards tonight. So I'll pull those out. So there we are. Hey, Randall Flagg. Good to see you over there in the chat room. Nice to have you here. In about 15 seconds, we're going to go dark for about 15 seconds as the show starts. Tonight, radio audience, we'll try to end on time instead of going over for the radio audience. We cut off the other night mid talking because we were still going and I wasn't looking at the time. So here we are. We're just about ready to roll. I'm going to go dark. Stay tuned for a few seconds.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAlanRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, AlanRoberts.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Wednesday evening, everyone. Welcome to the program. I'm Scotty Roberts, and this here is my show, the Intrepid radio program, broadcasting to you live in audio over on the radio station, OdysseyRadio.com. That's ODYSY radio.com. And also coming to you here on my Patreon channel. And those of you who are members, thank you for being here. And thank you for supporting this show. And onward and upward we go. Tonight, I am going to start off with one of these affirmators. This is kind of a tongue-in-cheek set. I've described this before, and I've called them affectionately the bunny rabbit riding a unicorn jumping over a rainbow card set. And they're just affirmation cards. Some of them are kind of funny. Some of them are kind of serious. But I think it's kind of fun to take a look at these and to do a little extemporaneous thinking on them and spur of the moment thinking. Let's see what we go. Let's shuffle these up and see what we get. These are a little oversized, so I can't shuffle them quite like I shuffle for poker or 5-card stud. These cards are marked. Yeah, they're a mess. They're a chocolate mess. Remember that ad from the 1970s? Those of you who are as old as I am, it was a milk or an M&M's ad. Bunch of cowboys playing poker. These cards are marked. Yeah, they're a mess. They're a chocolate mess. It's talking about M&M's. They won't melt in your hands. Let's see. Melt in your mouth, not in your hands. That's what the tag was. So let's take one more look at these. I'm going to cut this deck, and let's see what our affirmator card is for today. Okay. Right off the top of the deck, we're going to pull this card. You'll see it before I do. Let's see. Sanctuary is what it says. Let's see. I got to put my cheaters on to read these because although it doesn't look it on here, I'm sitting in very low light. Good for you. It seems you've earned some time away from the chaos of life. Wouldn't that be nice? It could be as small as a bubble bath or as big as a trip. Or maybe it's a small trip to a big bubble bath. Or a normal-sized trip to a tiny bubble bath. Or maybe you tripped and fell in someone else's bath. And that's how I met your mother. Whatever it is, it's waiting for you with open arms. Just pick your favorite sanctuary and unplug for a bit, especially if a bath is involved. And so sanctuary, it's time. How many of us on an everyday basis utter the famous words, oh, I could sure use a vacation, or I need a break? I mean, I get that all the time. And, you know, my breaks are funny because I work for myself. I usually have a little more ability to go do things I'd like to do, depending on funds available and stuff like that. My wife, however, being a mom, she does her various little project things at home. She does her tumblers and her other things like that to bring in a little bit of money. She was doing massage until, man, about 4 or 5 months ago, she screwed up her shoulder. And she's going to have some shoulder surgery, they think. And so her money-making skills from the last 22 years are suddenly something she can't do anymore. She'll crack out one every now and then, a good massage for somebody, but she doesn't like doing it anymore because it leaves her in pain for 2 days. So, but she needs a break sometimes because when she's not working and constantly doing stuff around here, constantly she goes over to the thrift store and works there a couple days a week. But when she does all of that, and she's got kids day in, day out, and it's not that I'm not here and I work here and I do my stuff, but I've got a child coming in, familial break. Are you frowning?
I look bad.
There you go. No, you don't. You look pretty good. You look like your mom now. She just colored her pink hair back to brunette.
Actually, it might turn out black.
Might turn out black.
Look how dark it is.
I see. Well, it's always dark before you wash it out.
Aubrey's dyeing her hair now too.
So, well, good. I'm doing a radio show. So,
Well, Aubrey's hair was green, so she's changing it so it's not green anymore.
well, there you go. Who wants green hair? All right, skedaddle.
Well, her hair was green.
I love you.
Her hair was green.
Bye.
And then light brown.
I don't
and
care.
Dark brown.
I don't
So
care
now
about
she's dyeing
Aubrey.
her hair.
I need a break.
And
I need a
guess what? Guess
vacation.
what? I'm making mac and cheese
Okay, go do it.
in my brown hair.
And yeah, I thought that was a swimsuit top. Get out of here in your underwear. Good
It's not
grief.
underwear.
All right,
This
that's
isn't
my
underwear.
11-year-old daughter.
This isn't underwear.
What is it?
It's a swimsuit.
Okay, get out of here. All right, folks. Pardon the familial interlude. They come less often these days, but they're still here. So that's my daughter dyeing her hair back to its kind of normal color, which is more of a sandy brunette. And she's afraid because it looks real dark. Well, it's still in her hair. She's got to wait till it sets and then she washes it out. So maybe we'll do a show on dyeing hair one of these days. No, not. So, as I was saying, my wife, surrounded by kids, bombarded all day long, especially the little one, the 8-year-old, constantly glued to her hip. Rainey wanted to take a little nap this afternoon. She wasn't feeling tip-top. She wanted to go take a nap. And the little child followed her into the bedroom 3 minutes. Where's mom? I said, she's taking a nap. Leave her alone. And she walks back there anyway, opens the door, and I hear Rainey say, I'm trying to take a nap. Get out of here. So my wife sometimes needs a break. We all need a break. We all need to get away from the stuff that is the stuff of life. Wouldn't it be nice? Sit back for a moment with me and imagine what would be your ideal vacation right now? What would you do to get away? Would it just be staying at the house? I think Barbie D, you have mentioned before, you just kind of like being where you are. Maybe that's ideal for you, for other people, to just getting away from it by getting away from it at home. Do you like to hit the road? Do you like to go traveling? I got several places I want to go with the family. That's not really getting away from it, but it's the family getting away from the regular routine. We want to go see the greasy grass, which is the Native American name for the Little Bighorn, or where Custer's last stand took place. We want to drive out there. It's out west of here on the other side of the Dakotas from us. The Dakotas bump right up against Minnesota. And so we want to do that. We want to go up to New York, up to Ticonderoga. We want to see the museum reproduction build owned by James Cawley of the original Star Trek television series from the 1960s sets. And they've got those all rebuilt up there, and they keep adding things. And it's in Ticonderoga, New York, where he's from. Little tiny town there. And you can also go out and see Fort Ticonderoga, which was a fort that was in existence. It was Fort Carillon in the French and Indian War, when the Brits attacked it and the Scots, the 42nd Royal Highlanders, attacked it. And then we finally won it, and they renamed it Ticonderoga. And it was there during the American Revolution. And it's a very cool, wonderful fort, right, sitting on the spit between, I think it's Lake George and Lake, one of those other lakes over there. And it sits right on the little spit. He was guarding the narrows between the two big lakes, and during the American Revolution. Great location. I'd go there. I'd love to go to Israel. That would be a great trip. I want to go back to Egypt. There's an old song that reminds me. Keith Green was a Christian songwriter and singer, kind of hippie freaky type of Jesus people type of guy back in the 70s, and he died very young in the 70s. He had a song, So You Want to Go Back to Egypt, where it's safe and secure. He's singing a song, of course, about the Exodus. He says, eating leeks and onions by the Nile. Oh, what breath but dining out in style. And they talk about Moses leading them out in the wilderness. And what are you bringing us out here for? Which is just, it was a fun song on the Exodus and the way the people acted after God delivered them. So look at the places you want to go and say, what keeps me from doing that? Is it all simply a financial thing? I know for us to drive, we were going to go last summer with Russ Haslage. He owns the Federation, Trek Federation, which owns this radio station. And we were going to go up there last summer. What happened last summer? Gas prices went so high, we found that to drive out there, it's a 20-plus hour trip from here. We were going to drive out. It was about $1,000 each way in gas. And it was just ridiculous. So we didn't go. So sometimes cost prevents us. We got to do local things. And we'll go grab our tent and pitch it at the local. My friend owns the river's edge up here, which is a big thing on the Apple River, float stuff and family campgrounds and so on. I just go pitch a tent over there. Get away from it. So all of that coming from that little card that says sanctuary. What is sanctuary for you? Is sanctuary staying at home? Is it reading a good book? Is it traveling across country? Is it traveling internationally? I know that's what I liked about traveling to Egypt. It wasn't a big bill out of my pocket because I paid for my airfare and then I stayed with John and Maria at their home in Luxor, my archaeologist friends, or out on their site doing stuff. So their archaeological site. So we always had a good time there. And hey, Barbie D, I just saw you said hi to Rowan. I just checked the chat room. Staying home, says Barbie D. That's what she likes to do. So there it is. And so find your sanctuary. Find the things that you need to do to take time for yourself and calm down and cool the jets and recharge, no matter what it is. So tonight, I want to talk about life after death and life after death after life. Is there such a thing? I know, as you know so well, my good friend Dave Potter, who was part of this show in the after show, the Captain's Cabin, almost every night for the last couple of years, he passed away rather unexpectedly. And it gave us a rough week last week. And again, for those of you kind of catching up tonight with the show, we didn't do a show at all last week. I just couldn't muster up the emotional energy. It had kind of sunk me for a while. But the whole thing about Dave was that Dave, and if you didn't glean it from the show that we do, we sometimes got into arguments or discussions during the Captain's Cabin. Sometimes it was about reincarnation or life after death. Dave had a very firmly set of beliefs about God, about life after death, about reincarnation, all of those things. And I'd say the jury's out for me on that. Even though I was raised studying the Bible in a very fundamental conservative Baptist setting, Went into ministry and all of that after Bible school and seminary. I still ended up years later really questioning what was real, because it seems the more you study those things, the more you find they look a whole lot like every other religion that's out there. And then even within Christianity, there was such division and such arguing over what happened and where you go and what church polity should be and blah blah blah, that I just backed away from it all. And but I still ask those questions. For me, reincarnation is a thing that it's not a provable thing. There is no way to look at reincarnation and say, well, the jury's out and back and it's been settled. Here's our evidence. We don't have evidence for it. We do have things with energy and mental things. See, I lean a lot toward it because of certain things I've seen, certain stories I've heard with people that have experienced things, the stories that where you've been with other people that you're with now, only you were in different form in those past lives. Some people are very keen on that stuff and very aware of it. And I had always thought there was something very military. If I have past lives, they revolve around a lot of military, because I had all those military dreams when I was younger. But what happens to us after we die? That's the big mystery, isn't it? We might be convinced of one thing or the other, religiously or spiritually, but the problem is none of us has been there yet that we remember. If you're a reincarnationist, none of us has been there, so we don't know where it goes. I look at Uncle Dave's passing and I say he's on a great adventure. Probably the most profound adventure of his life, which was the end of this life. I've always said with tarot, when I read certain cards, that the death card, death doesn't mean physical death. It means the opening to something new. Something old is going to pass and the new is going to start. But that's what death is. That's what the picture is in that card. That death is a doorway to something new, a new life. And so we look at life, and we look at life after death. And human beings have been asking that great, big, huge, enormous question of an existential nature since we stood upright and stopped dragging our knuckles in the primordial goo. We've always been asking, what happens when we die? You look at the ancients, you go back. I love archaeology, I love history and anthropology. You go back and you start looking at, here's for instance, I was watching Time Team, which was a show that ran from the early 90s to the mid to late 2000 teens. And it was with Tony Robinson was the host of that. And it was in England, and they dug up all these places. Dave and I talked about this show a lot. They would dig up a lot of sites around England. That's what they did. And they did in 3 days. They spent at each site to try to establish one thing or another. And they were looking at all they spent a lot of time looking into Roman England when the Romans came, the first couple hundred centuries of the new millennia, and or of the first millennia AD. And they sometimes would dig back even further, and they found graves and tombs that dated back 4,500 to 5,000 years ago in England. This is about the time when Stonehenge was originally built, its first phase. You're talking 5,000 years ago. And this is, what's 5,000 years ago? Talk about Jesus, the time of Jesus, 2,000 years ago. Talk about Moses, or the time of King David. What would that be? Almost 3,000 years ago. The time of Moses, 3,500 years ago. You still go back another 1,500 years in time, and they would find graves, and some of them just elaborately laid out, these tombs with the gold and the riches and the belongings, down from the richest leaders of the tribes to the most common person. They would bury them with a little clay jar of something of their belongings and so on, or an arrowhead or something. And it was things to take into the new life. So they had ever since mankind has been walking, civilization has started, as far back as Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 years ago. We always had this belief that there was something else coming. And it was either through a set of gods or a god or Jehovah or Elohim or all of these gods that are out there in the Judeo-Christian and the Abrahamic religions. So we've always had something. Do we fade into nothingness, we'd ask, or non-existence? I know people today that believe that. Do we reawaken as crying newly born infants or animals in some kind of karmic cycle of reincarnation? Do you come back as a cockroach because you lived a bad life? Do you go into the other dimension? You could call it eternity of some form, and decide what you're going to do in the next life. Hey, I was a rich guy in this next life. This life, I'm going to be a struggling artist. I think that's what my soul must have decided. And so I'm going to chide myself when I get back there someday. So maybe there's that white light when we die that we hear so much about on Larry King and Oprah, with this warm glow and welcoming smiles of long dead relatives. We go through this tunnel and all my relatives are there smiling and waving. Some of us have reservations for the kingdom of heaven. So whether one's individual beliefs, whatever your individual belief is, it seems that human beings are positively obsessed with the question of what happens when the screen fades to black. And when we're younger, we don't think about that so much. But as I mentioned, when Dave passed a week ago Monday, one of my buddies who's a couple of years older than me said, we've reached that place. We've turned that corner a little bit where we start seeing our friends and people around us going, because we're getting there ourselves eventually. But why is this? Why does the question of what happens after we die, why is that there? Why does that, no pun intended, why does that haunt us so much? And so there was a book I looked at called How Plato and Pythagoras Can Save Your Life. In that book, the author discussed the notion that human beings are uniquely able to contemplate the question of life after death because we're the only species that can use our minds to travel through time and project into the future. At least that we know of. We're the only species that can do that. And what do we find in said future? Our inevitable death, our passing. This life comes to an end. And what do we find is that it scares the hell out of us. Or some might argue that scares the heaven and hell into us. So a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Ernest Becker, had written in his seminal work, The Denial of Death, that in essence, the sum of all human endeavor, our art, our architecture, our religions, our procreation, are all just desperate attempts to deny our own immortality, or our own mortality, and thus soothe our terror and what psychologists call thanatos anxiety over the possibility that there's nothing more beyond the physical realm. And so we scratch and try to survive as long as we can. Many fear death. I don't fear death. I fear maybe the mode, but I don't fear death itself. Then there's the popular wisdom that seems to be that we'll never really know what happens post-mortem because no one has ever come back to tell the tale. So far as we know, unless you believe ghosts that you talk to, spirits of people who've gone on, which I have. But that might not be entirely true. Beyond the stories of people who've had near-death experiences, NDEs, that have been documented by psychologists like Dr. Raymond Moody, Life After Life, Dr. Kenneth Ring, Mindsight. There are also the well-documented and rigorously researched cases of children who, without the benefit of NDEs or the aid of hypnotic regression, spontaneously and vividly recall past lives. What about that? We've heard some of those stories. We talked about a couple of them on this show before in a topic about a year ago, something like that. But in these cases, we're not talking about kids remembering being Cleopatra or Napoleon. No, we're talking about children having veridical or documentable as accurate specific memories of people that were fairly recently deceased, from several months to several years. And oftentimes these memories include the names of relatives, including parents and siblings, names of villages or districts where they've lived, memories of their private occupations, and most compellingly, very precise and accurate descriptions of the causes of their prior death. You've heard the cases of the little boy, and I don't remember the name, but there was a little boy a few years back that remembered how he died as a fighter pilot in World War II. And this little boy was 4 or 5 years old. And he was telling his parents that, yeah, I died in a plane crash. I was shot down. And he gave his name. And they looked it up and they found that this was a real guy. How would my 4 or 5-year-old know the facts about this guy? And it wasn't just reciting something, oh, I died in an airplane crash like that TV show I saw. It was specific names and places and dates and relatives. How does a little child gain that memory in his mind, if not through some kind of past life thing? Most startling of all the cases were the actual birthmarks or congenital birth defects on the child that correlate to the cause of death of an oftentimes traumatic nature in the earlier incarnation that they lived. And as difficult as this is for many to believe, these cases, over 3,000 of them, have been exhaustively documented. And what people don't know is that this academically rigorous reincarnation research has been going on at a major U.S. university for over 40 years now. It goes back to when I was a teenager. Well, early 20s. So at the Division of Perceptual Studies, former the Division of Personality Studies, a unit of the Department of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences at the University of Virginia, Dr. Jim B. Tucker has carried on the work that his predecessor, Dr. Ian Stevenson, began in 1967 and carried on until his death in 2007. And incredibly, Stevenson spent almost 40 years traveling all over the world with his research team to methodically interview, photograph, and document these amazing cases. And they are. There are books out there you can pick up to read about these various cases. Maybe we'll talk about more of them in the upcoming days on this show. But in his books, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation, which came out in 1974, and Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect, which came out almost 25 years later in 97, he details the painstaking lengths that he and his team went through to authenticate and verify the accuracy of the children's past life memories. And in cases that he felt were compromised, in other words, the child had been exposed to information of the prior life, he would reject them as inconclusive. Only cases where no other possible explanations could be accounted for the children's memories were accepted as being suggestive of reincarnation. And does that prove that there's life after death? Well, you draw your own conclusions on that. I'm admittedly biased. I admit that freely. It's all the experiences I've had, all the belief systems I've gone through, or the major belief system I went through, um, all the NDE experiences I've heard, the dreams I've had, the spirits that I've connected with, that have contacted me, have brought me to what conclusion? That there's more to life than this biological container we call a body. You can put whatever religious trapping on it you want, whatever scientific trapping, there's more to it. There's actually an incredible amount of research that indicates that consciousness can manifest independent of the body. And this included what's known as DMILs, or distant mental influence on living systems. Research conducted by psychologist Dr. William Broad. His experiments, detailed in his book, Distant Mental Influences, that came out in 2003, yielded statistically significant data regarding people's abilities to mentally influence, among other things. The hemolysis, or death by osmotic stress, inhuman red blood cells that were in a petri dish, as well as being able to cause changes in people's sympathetic autonomic nervous system, as measured by galvanic skin responses. So, in addition, there have been controlled double-blind experiments that have shown that intercessory prayer, healing prayer at a distance, can yield very positive recovery outcomes for both coronary and oncology patients. And then there's the mental influence work of William Tiller and his team at Stanford. In that research, Tiller had conducted repeatable experiments wherein the properties of a material object, in this case the pH level of a sample of water, were impacted. The pH level was either raised or lowered by focused meditative thought. You ever think about that? How our brains have the capacity to do things like that. Pardon me, I have to take a sip. Wet my whistle, as they say, even though I can't whistle. That's about the best I get. So I couldn't be a whistler. So the skeptic might say, so what? Even if I grant that those experiments were sound, what does the pH level of water getting lowered or raised by meditative thought have to do with the question of life after death? That's a skeptic for you, though. I think a real skeptic is somebody who says, I don't know. I don't put my faith or my belief in that. Show me how it works. That's a skeptic. The other kind of skeptic's just a denialist. And they house their denialism in skepticism. Well, if any part of this research that we're talking about here is accurate, any part at all, then we'd have to conclude that the mechanistic, the materialistic paradigm by which we understand a universe, a paradigm that precludes any metaphysical, which means simply beyond the physical realm, realities such as thoughts influencing the hemolysis of red blood cells or consciousness surviving biological death, is a faulty paradigm, according to a skeptic. Any valid theory has to explain all the available data, even outlier phenomena like the ones I've cited. So if the mechanistic material paradigm indeed has a crack in it, then that crack can open up the door for other more satisfying non-mechanistic paradigms, don't you think? If there's a hole in these theories, those holes can be gone through to find out what does exist. So, and that can allow for documented metaphysical realities. So, indeed, there are, in the alternative, non mechanistic, non material perspective offered to us by today's theoretical physicists, we have strange new worlds of quantum string and, more recently, holographic theories of the universe. I told this story about the day before Uncle Dave died. I was at the hospital, and as my good friend Dana said, Dave is not in his body, but he's still tethered to it. I mean, technically, he's dead, but he's not spiritually gone yet. And I remember the second time I went in to see him that Sunday, a week ago Sunday, last Sunday. And I told this story on one of my shows. I think it was Sunday morning. I went back into the department where he was, the wing where he was, and I went to the front desk there. And I'm looking at the woman that signed us in earlier. I'm still wearing the badge. It's at the Mayo Clinic. She's in front of me, and off to my left, about 20 feet away, is Dave's room. And it's big sliding glass doors, and there was bright sunshine coming in. And there he was. He was laying in bed. I could see him. His head was turned a bit to the side. He had the respirator down his throat. And he was sleeping or unconscious. And or even dead at that point. Dead physically, not spiritually yet. And I said to the woman at the desk, same woman in a short Pakistani or Afghani, wearing the hijab and the colorful robes go with it, about all of 4 foot tall and heavy accented. And she asked if she could help me. And I said, yeah, I'd like to go see my friend Dave for a few minutes again. Oh, that is not him, was her answer. I looked again, and I didn't have my glasses on, so I squinted a bit. I thought, my eyes aren't that bad. And I squinted, and I go, that's definitely Dave. And she said, oh, no, he is gone. That is not him. I said, I'm looking at him. Can you see him right there? And she wouldn't look. And she said, oh, he is gone. That is not him. It just looks like him. It's not really him. And it's someone else, she said. I said, well, then where is he if that's not him? And she said, oh, he's down in another wing. I said, oh, so you moved him? Oh, no, we did not move him. But he's down there. This is not him. And I could have barged past her and said, well, I'm going over there anyway, okay? But I didn't. I walked back out a little frustrated. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to this other wing, she told me, just to prove the point that Dave is there. He's not in the other wing. And I saw Sam down the hall and standing in front of the family lounge. And I put up my hands like in frustration. I'm like, what the fuck? I mouthed to him. And then a man in a suit kind of came out of the side hallway, and he saw that, and he was very soft spoken and polite. And he said, as I approached, he said, Can I help you out? He says, I'm one of the chaplains here. Is there anything I can help you with? And I told him the story, and he said, wait here. And he said, let me go check on something. And he walks into the side door of the wing and comes back out a minute later, and he says, come on with me. And so I go in, and there's Dave laying in his bed, just like I had seen him a couple of minutes ago. And there was no change. And so I got to visit him one more time. And that's when I let my friend Dana wanted to sing a song to him over the phone because she couldn't make it to the hospital. And she did that. And so, but the woman in the hijab, she was gone. And then suddenly there was nobody there in the ward. No nurses, no doctors. I take that back. There was a nurse in his room. And so the big question that we asked immediately after that, Travis Thorpe and I got to talking about it, and we said, was that some kind of a spiritual experience? And let me explain what I mean by that. Could this have been this woman, a universal plant, if you will? I mean, what did she say? And I went through the things she said. She said, "Oh, that's not him. He's not there. That just looks like him. You're mistaking him for, it's probably somebody else. He's gone. We didn't move him. He's down in the other ward. And no, that is definitely not him." All right. Well, what the heck does that mean? And Travis and I were talking about it. We got it right away. I mean, right away, we're looking at that and we're saying, that was one of those weird spiritual stories, wasn't it? Where somebody was sent to tell you, maybe they're telling us he's already gone. That's not him. He's gone. Would Dave have perhaps in spirit wandered down to the next ward just to see what's going on down there? Not because he's afraid or lonely or anything like that, because I think all indicators are that he's none of those things. That perhaps he just left the room, he left his body and went wandering in the hospital. It's unanswerable, says Randall Flagg. Yeah, exactly. So Lake Champlain, yes, that was it, Randall Flagg. Thank you for a little earlier. So there is a little story that for me corroborates that there is life after death, because what happened to Dave? Who was this person? Was this a messenger sent to us? In the book, How Plato and Pythagoras Can Save Your Lives, we can go back to ancient Greece for a metaphysical realm of ideal forms paradigm that presages the whole quantum, string, and holographic theories and others that give us a more paradoxical and abstract universe where death is a form of rebirth in consciousness. Not matter, physical stuff. It's the causal source of universal existence. And boy, does that segue right off of that story about Dave, perhaps wandering the hospital. And boy, did the Greeks really get into death, from harvest and fertility festivals and mythology to death recreating Orphic mystery rites. The Greeks were very into the whole death thing. And why? Why the morbid fascination with the underworld? Why was there a philosophy itself called by Plato a form of death before dying? The answer? Plato and Pythagoras believed that in realizing our ephemeral physical nature, we'd better apprehend our transcendent and eternal soul form. Thus, the Greeks believed that via the mind, body, soul purification of metaphysical philosophy, a person could get beyond the illusion of the material world and experience what some have called ultimate reality. What do you think of that? This journey in which one faced one's own death and darkness, one's own shadow side, was part of a transformative and integrating hero's journey, to use Joseph Campbell's language, in which one could, as Plato said, die before dying. For the ancients, this was achieved by a rigorous mind, body, contemplative, philosophical lifestyle that culminated in a ritual known as incubation. And during this transformative ritual, a person was supposed to lay totally still in a dark cave for hours, even days. And through this process, if a person had been properly trained and prepared, they could experience an amazing transformation, wherein there was a sense of shedding the physical body as a snake sheds its skin, maybe a lot like the vision quests, Reuben Fasthorse has spoken of those, where they go out for days into the wild with a blanket and a cup of water and a piece of bread or something, and you experience the same thing, this spiritual transformation. This process or transfiguration was the human alchemy that Carl Jung wrote extensively about, and that the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Babylonians had discovered thousands of years earlier. Are we just stumbling upon old things? Does Judeo-Christianity or the Abrahamic religions, have they eschewed those things and given a better answer for something that we believed we always had the answer for before that? Perhaps the real key to the transformative, the transformation magic, if you will, that seems to accompany actual near-death experience lays with the dissolution of the self and the glimpse into the infinite. And in a sense, death can be seen as a release or an expansion of the individual egoic, if you will, level of consciousness into the larger expanse of the universe. So as the walls of the self are torn down, what's left? Nothing. Or is that nothing perhaps everything? The allness of the ultimate reality. So what does happen to a person after they die? What does happen? Maybe a whole new awakening. And if you adhere to the teachings Plato and Pythagoras wrote about, you don't even have to physically die to experience that life-changing and reality-rocking awakening. Maybe that's one of the answers to dealing with what's after, is dealing with what's here. What happens after we die? None of us really knows, but I think we get a pretty good idea by taking care of some of these things within ourselves. And what about the whole reincarnation question? Is it just a coincidence? I talked about how kids tell stories about being deceased, or deceased other people, claiming to have lived before. When people die, nature sometimes reacts. At a picnic, a woman grieving the loss of her 5-day-old child sees a small bird land on her breast. The bird stays there until she shoos it away. The act symbolizes her letting go of the baby. A woman's favorite flower blooms after her death in the dead of winter. What does that mean? The Pulse Massacre, the Orlando Vigil outside Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, was attended by thousands of people. A bell tolled for each of the 49 victims killed when a man opened fire in the Orlando Gay Club in June of 2016, if you remember that in the news. As the names were being read, a photographer snapped a picture of a flock of precisely 49 birds flying overhead. The birds had not been released and were an apparent freak occurrence at the vigil, which left the crowd absolutely stunned. Are these coincidences that we see and we deal with, or is there something more to them? What about this transition from life? What happens to us when we die? An age-old question for which religions have provided answers with faith, but little proof. Our government spends millions on health and scientific research, but almost nothing on the death transition we'll all go through. What do you believe? Again, the Tibetan Book of the Dead helps prepare the soul for the experience of after-body death. In one version, the soul goes through several transitional stages, or bardos, on the way out. And with enough preparation, there may be a portal out into the next level of being. If not, there will be a return to this life in some form or another. Maybe we just become a part of everything. Is that our energy? Is that the soul? Is that the spirit? Perhaps we become part of all that's around us, as is suggested by this poem that says this: do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. That was by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Some young children tell their parents that they were someone else, someone who had lived and died. Research at the University of Virginia has found remarkable correlations between those details reported by those children, as we mentioned earlier. These correlations are among the most amazing coincidences. Skeptics do their usual, oh, that's just a chance event. But researcher Jim B. Tucker, who we mentioned earlier, collects data that demands a more nuanced answer. And the probabilities of the correlation are too incredibly low to ignore. And skeptics, they can all go to hell in a circle jerk, as far as I'm concerned, because you know what they do? Oh, that's just a coincidence. Well, that's no better an explanation, but it appeases their skepticism. It's good to be skeptical to a certain point. So we talked about Ian Stevenson and his work. And Ian Stevenson needed someone to carry on his reincarnation work at the University of Virginia. He was 77 years old. Jim Tucker, a child psychiatrist child psychiatrist, he took over that practice. And there's so much to this. And there's so much to look at when it comes to life after death. And for the radio show, we are out of time tonight. We got to say our good nights very quickly here. So I want to thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time. We'll stick around for a few minutes in the captain's cabin. Live long and prosper.
The Intrepid Radio Program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
Oops, I hit the wrong button. Hey, folks, welcome back. Thanks, Dan Madsen. I just got your message. I appreciate that. So there you go. That was an interesting discussion on life after death, on reincarnation. Dan Madsen sent me a message privately. I just want to see if it's okay to read that. He just says, brother, you were on fire tonight. Your discussion on life after death was utterly fascinating. It's a subject that I have thought long and hard about and contemplate on a daily basis. Well done. Well, thank you, Dan. I certainly appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And folks, I hope that you all take these things in. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not ultimately convinced, but it is fodder for discussion. It's things that we think about. It's places we wonder about. Where are we going to go? What's going to happen? And so Dan thinks about it. I think about it. Dave and I thought about it. We talked about it on the show. Professor Bauer and all the other people that would come in here and talk on this show, Sarah Youssef, we all think about these things. And they're all things that we ought to all think about. And we ought to all ask the questions about. So there it is. If you want to, we're in the captain's cabin now. It's a little different since we started on Patreon, and it's a little tougher to call into the show. You can call into that link though, and it will bring you up in my my StreamYard, which will then broadcast onto the Patreon. So if you want to come in and talk about it, we'll go a few minutes and we'll see where it goes after that. So as you saw, one of the ads I played tonight, my own ad for Ancient Heroes trading cards. I've talked about them online. I've talked about them on the show. That's a project I did 30 years ago with two friends of mine from a friend of mine from college and his wife, Terry. And we wanted to do a set of biblical trading cards for kids without screaming, we are a religious product. You know, oh, it's only good for Sunday school and church. No, we wanted to take these characters and put them into Terry and I, even this morning, just had a new, fresh conversation about that. Making how historical should we get with what we've already written. We're going through and rewriting and touching things up and adding things. 30 years of reflection, And I said, I think it's good to keep the history in, because maybe even add a little bit more. Because what it does is it takes these stories that kids are used to hearing in, bathrobes and sandals and bed sheets and beards. These cute little stories, even think of the play school. I remember this from years ago. The play school Noah's Ark, the big yellow ark that opens up and all the little wobbly animals come out, like Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Noah was one of those, I think. And the little smiley faces on all the animals. And we think of these as storybook things, but you start to get into the stories themselves, the stories of the individuals and the people. And as you know so well from this show meaning this show I've done for so many years, we will focus on some of those biblical characters and flesh out who they really were, what they were really like, what their times were like. And so I said, maybe it's good to keep some of that in there. It doesn't have to be heavy-handed, but just let them know these were real people. And it puts it into a context for kids' minds. And these cards are really, the art I did for them is really targeting a teenage audience, and mostly boys when you think about it, but there are girls who collect cards too. And so we took this old set from 30 years ago that was published and did very well 30 years ago. And I refurbished is not the right word, revitalized, reimagined a lot of the art. I used the same old art, and surprisingly, some of it made me cringe a little bit. Some of it, I think, was not much different than I do today as far as comic book style art. And I just added new backgrounds. I freshened up the art. I went in and digitally added backgrounds. I digitally shaded and highlighted things on the characters that I hadn't done before. And, where a background on one of the cards might have been just a plain sky, white to yellow to dark orange with a white ball of a sun in it in the background. I took that out and I put in a background that's mountainous, showing, ancient Israel or something, or the approaching armies of the Philistines or something like that, to just spruce those things up and make them, I think, much more modernized. And we redesigned the card. So that's what that little ad was. Ancient Heroes. The site is there. I'm currently working on revamping and redesigning and upgrading that whole site and the look and the feel. It's ancientheroesofthebible.com. And so you can go to that site and you can take a quick peek. Not much to see there yet, just kind of holding place images and things like that. But I'm working on that right now. And before the end of the day Friday, we'll probably have something that looks a heck of a lot different than it does now. And might give us a lot more. It'll definitely be a little prettier and a little more fun to look at. So, Barbie D says, Scotty, I will be honest, whenever people bring up the topic, I tend to not really listen. Did you listen tonight? Was that to tell me you weren't really tuned into the thing tonight, or was it something that caught your attention? What's your belief system? Does it go against your belief system? Does it go alongside of your belief system? Is it something that I just am not in the mood? I don't like listening to those things. So share that with us. Share what you're thinking about that. And we'll be around for a few more minutes here. And we do have some comments over here. Oh, Grumpy Stack was here. I never think about nothing, Grumpy Stack said. There you go. And that's all right. I didn't see your comment earlier. Your comment showed up in the chat room on the StreamYard, but it didn't show up over in the chat room on Patreon. So they're all linked together. Grumpy, if you can hear me, if you're still sitting out there. So in light of that, with nobody calling in, Um, well, here, Dan is messaging me. Again, Dan, if it's okay, I'm talking about some of this. If it's, he says, I've experienced a lot of death in my life over the last 5 years, most notably his dad. And that and advancing age have made me ponder what comes next a great deal. Me too, Dan. I am really the same way. We've turned that corner. I have. I'm a little older than you are by a couple of years, I think. But we've turned that corner and we said, look, I get it. I'm not the young, hot, good looking buck anymore. My own daughter jokingly calls me old man these days. I let her do it. It's not really being disrespectful. She's just having fun with her dad. And wow, you're a lot older than mom. I go, well, yeah, I am. So I've turned that corner and we start thinking about it more. Things like with me, heart problems, diabetes, all of those kinds of things, they start making you think. Dan's got his own issues. Barbie D has her own. Josh has his own. Randall has his own. Everybody's got different issues. There's a point in life where we say, whoa, if I can quote Captain Jean-Luc Picard from which movie was it? It was the one with First Contact. And he's talking about, I'm convinced, he said, that I have fewer years ahead than I had behind. And ain't that the truth? You start getting to a certain age and you go, right now at 62, I'm convinced I have less years ahead than I had before me, unless I live to be 124, which I don't think is going to happen. I predict 104, but we'll see. I told Rainey, you'll be 84 before I die, so hang on. And so, yeah, as Dan said, it becomes more of a reality. We know we're not young anymore. We can't do the same things that we did when we were young. We can try to do those same things. That's what puts guys like me in early graves. And you've heard it said before, oh, Bob, he thought he was so much younger than he really was. He just couldn't let go of his youth. And, he had a massive heart attack and died, or a stroke or whatever. I've got the same stuff that goes on. I keep trying to do certain things. As I said at the beginning of the show, I'm a little achy and tired today for no real reason at all, other than I'm 62 years old. Now, there are guys who are 62 and feel like they're in their prime still, but those are the guys that, usually in Hollywood, and they have trainers and they work out 8 hours a day. For me, I want to be able to just, keep my heart level going and be able to walk and run around a little bit. And I want to climb a tree. I can still climb a tree. It just hurts more when I'm done. That's what I've said affectionately. I can do everything and anything I did as a young man of 19. It just hurts more now. And it takes longer to recuperate. And that's the truth. So, having said that, and we've kind of wrapped up for tonight, we're going to call it a show. I will see you back here Friday. I had a good discussion with Niall the other day, or last night. We talked for quite a bit, and we may try to gather a couple of people together and do a show focused on the Fae, the fairy folk, the elementals, all that. We've talked about that before on this show, but there's other aspects to look at. Interesting stuff that goes along with this whole thing of wondering about reincarnation and life after death and being at one with part of the universe. There's stuff out there we can't explain that has nothing to do with being, spooky and scary. It's just part of the universe that we don't normally experience. So we're going to look into some of that. We may open the show up on Friday to the general public, but I'm still thinking about that yet, because right now it's just a Patreon subscribers. So if you're here, thank you for being here again. And you know what? We're going to get out of here. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks for being part of the show. Thanks for being part of my Patreon. Means a heck of a lot to me, folks. And for the time being, let's get out of here. Let's vamoose. Let's scram. Have a good night and live long and prosper.